Loneliness is because you feel disconnected.
Yeah.
Either physically, intellectually, or emotionally.
For most people, if you're like, Veer, oh yeah, he's the debating guy, or he's the dramatics guy, or he's the dumb charades guy, or he's the kid from Africa. And it's also very just sort of othering.
I don't know, everybody math skills, but for an average to drop from an entire number is a very big
Yeah.
deal.
If you were to aggregate the amount of love that is felt for you in the universe at this moment in time, it is far greater than you assume it is. And just accept that as a goddamn reality because it's true.
Hi Veer, welcome to Call Me Hopeful.
Hello, you.
Thank you for coming. Today we're talking about loneliness.
I love how I was your phone call for this topic. You're like, who looks lonely? That guy. But very apt for a comedian. It's quite a solitary profession. So good choice in that sense, at least.
I was going to ask you about that later, but since you brought it up, you said that and I didn't fully understand why you said that a comic would be a good choice for loneliness.
Well, we work 2 hours a day when we're doing stand-up. And we spend, if you're a successful comic, you're spending between 6 to 8 months in airports and hotels in a year. And then you're just kind of in a hotel room for 8 hours until you live at night. So it's very much like a vampire kind of a life. So you get to see the world, but you get to see it alone. And anybody that you can kind of take along with you, after city number 6, you have to go and they don't really have to go. And people need routes. So you spend a fair amount of time on your own and having to be on your own so that you can absorb the world a little bit. That's why the old adage of, the clown is lonely. You've heard that in 20 bad movies and 2 good movies. You've seen it well done. So I think that's where it comes from. Traveling circus sort of a syndrome.
I picked loneliness and wanted to talk about it because in the past year and a half, suddenly I see it everywhere.
Sure.
And just to get the basics out of the way, obviously, just because you're surrounded by people doesn't mean you're not lonely. And just because you're alone doesn't mean you're lonely.
Yeah, exactly.
And loneliness is entirely a subjective experience. And my favorite way to explain subjective experiences to people is the AC is at 24 degrees Celsius. You're feeling cold. I'm feeling hot.
Yeah.
Neither of us is lying. And we feel what we feel.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the best way for me to describe a subjective experience. So first, I wanted to sort of understand what loneliness looks like for you. Because when I was in college, I'd gone abroad and I was lonely and I didn't know that I was lonely. And so I didn't have a lot of friends. And I didn't think anyone particularly wanted to hang out with me. Not that they didn't want to, but I didn't think anyone actively wanted to hang out with me. And despite that, the few friends who would attempt to hang out with me, I would close the blinds and lock my door and pretend like I wasn't in. They'd be knocking and I'd be sitting there going, oh, please go away. I'm pretending to be asleep, which makes no sense.
Yeah. Or does for that moment in time.
Yeah. But technically, if I'm feeling lonely, then So can you tell us a little bit about what your loneliness looks like?
I think it's changed recently for me with the caveat that I'm right now in the middle of my life, as you would, So I think as a man in your 20s and perhaps a better part of your 30s, loneliness looks like, will I find love? Will I find intimacy? Will somebody take an interest in me? Or will somebody take an interest in what I have to say? And some things can I take an interest in? And if you find yourself devoid of that, you feel sort of empty because you're kind of looking for companionship, yes, but also emotional validation, physical validation, or syncopation with another person. And then if you hit the middle of your life where perhaps you've been validated and perhaps you're like, this is who I am and it ain't so bad. And this is probably who I'm going to be for the second half of this life. I think that loneliness looks like something happened. Who am I sharing it with? Is there a go-to for things I don't understand? in a phase in my life where I should be able to understand most things. So I think that's what loneliness looks like. So I know a lot of people who are 40 and with somebody, but they don't partake in their journey in any way, or they don't really get what the other person is going through, or don't have a lot of empathy, even though they're in full relationships or full marriages, as you were. And I think that's sort of adult loneliness, you know. So the yes, being alone part of it, as you get older, most of us spend a fair amount of our day alone. If you think about it, if you work in a bank, you're surrounded by human beings, but you're effectively alone for 9 hours a day. Whether you're airline crew, whether you're etc. So you're getting used to seeing the people that you love 2 hours a day, if you will. But do they fill you up in those 2 hours? Is something you really begin to ask yourself in your 40s. So I think that's what loneliness looks like right now, under the assumption that you have somebody on this path. If you don't have somebody on this path in your 40s, I would imagine it's a much tougher experience, because allegedly, as you get older, bigger and bigger shit is going to keep happening to you. And every decision that you make has bigger and bigger consequences. So you need somebody to share that with. And that may not be sexual or intimate, but just somebody, I think that's what it looks like as an adult.
And would you say that's what your loneliness looks like as well? With someone to share it with, but trying to find that connection in those 2 hours, or?
Yeah, I think so. I think also for me, the strange sort of poetic justice and injustice of my profession, like where God takes, she gives, right? In that sense. And I get to be the glue that brings 5,000 people together on a given evening in 45 cities in the world or 100 cities in the world. So I get to see 4,000 people who have not been in a room with this many Indians, or who miss home. I get to see couples hook up. I get to see people find each other at my show. I get to see people holding hands because they made this experience happen with each other. And then I have to go back to a hotel room alone, or then I have to wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and take a 4 a.m. flight and be that guy for another city. But it's like watching something that you've orchestrated but never fully get to partake in. And so there's a deep sense of disconnect and loneliness that comes with that. And yet the flip side, like I said, she gives as well. I've gotten to see the world 4 times. Who the fuck gets to say that? Who the hell gets to say, not I've traveled a lot, like I've seen the world. I've seen every continent in the world in most countries. And I get to tell dick jokes and people show up, which is a blessing. So in that sense, but that's my sense of loneliness sometimes, where sometimes I just wish I was in the audience. I wish I could experience what they experience instead of having to orchestrate their experience.
I also wanted to talk about that, because there is connection even in strangers, especially through art. That's what art does for us, essentially, right? I'm at a karaoke bar and I don't necessarily know the people, but that one song comes on and we all start singing it as if we're best friends and we've been singing the same song together for the past whatever, how many ever years. What is art that makes you feel connected?
Music. I'll cry. Good song, any genre, I'll cry. I'm saying Taylor Swift, Yeezy something, like it doesn't matter. I'm in. And I think it's also because it's the one thing I'm bad at. I make music and I'm not great at it. And I'm surrounded by like 5 legit musicians in my band who all kind of look at me like, oh, you're special. Like that's how precious this little song you've written is. Music, man. Like if I could have the level of talent that like an Adele has, or that a Kendrick Lamar has, I'd give up the acting and the stand-up like that. That would be the choice.
When you're lonely, what do you listen to?
If I'm abroad, the soundtrack of Dil Se. So something about like Air Ajnabi, is bringing you home vibes. I listen to a lot of Kendrick Lamar because that's kind of like get up in the morning, get into it. and this is just gonna sound old as fuck, but I listen to something called Classic FM. There's an app called Classic FM, which is just classical music, and that's like my
Mellow.
kind of centers me kind of this thing. So I always have music on all hours of the day. In the green room before I go on, it's really weird because like I have a playlist for when you're in the audience, right? The playlist like banging, get you into the mood and all of that stuff. But if you cut to my green room, it's just like like it's just classical back there.
Actually, I wanted to, like you said, loneliness as an adult looks different.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know about growing up because you moved around a lot.
I'm the outsider
Yeah.
personified.
Africa, Delhi, boarding school, and then even New York.
Yeah.
So what was loneliness like in those times?
As you get older, you discover that assimilation is severely overrated, right? And can sometimes border into conformity, which is very dangerous to art. But you're a kid from Africa in boarding school. In boarding school we have tuck, which is just the stuff that your parents have given you, like snacks, biscuits, chips, etc. All your tuck looks different. Like kids have like Parle G and Maggie, but you've got some random African, YY or something like that, etc., etc. How you dress is slightly different, your accent is slightly different, and you want nothing more than to blend in. And I think for me, I was chucked onto a stage when I was 7.5, 8. Well, 8.5, 9 actually. And
you were a tree.
I was a tree, right? I was a tree before that, but there's this gentleman called Mr. Abraham in boarding school who is a very scary man. He'd actually he'd cane you, but he'd cane you not just like with his cane, but with his words. So he'd be like, you bloody blighter, I'd break your bones and parcel them to your father, skin your backside and feed you to the wolves. And you're like, this is just very good alliteration and like phraseology and physical abuse, but quite a combination of the two things. He figured out this kid belongs on stage. And really instinctively, I got on stage and I was like, oh, home. Like I have zero fear under these lights till date. And it's where I feel most at home. So then he put me into like, what's the good word, debating, this and that. And that further isolates you. So I've been somebody that people watched since I was 8.5, which is a weird thing to be, for someone who, by virtue of where they're from, just wants to fit in. So that's been the strange dichotomy for me as a kid. We don't get him, but he wins trophies for the school in these 3 or 4 things. So we'll be nice to him for now. But you're always wondering as a kid, are you really my friend? So I think that's what it looked like for me.
Would you say that your experience with loneliness has been situational or chronic?
I treat it like par for the course. And that's hard to qualify, so I will. It's what I have to go through so that I can have the privilege of this job that I have. And so that I can make people feel a certain way. Most people view loneliness as, why is this happening to me? Or how can I fix this? I view it as neither one of those things. I kind of view it as, oh, this is what I've signed up for. Or this is what I have to do so that I get to make people feel amazing. And that does a lot of things for me as well. So it's not just a one-way equation. So in that sense, it's very different. It's a situation I've signed myself up for. I would imagine it's much tougher on my wife and my family, who did not sign up for this and who don't get the payoff that I get in that sense. So to me, it's, how doctors like, we have to amputate so you don't lose your other leg. It's a very logical, this is the pain and this is the benefit. That's where loneliness lies in my life. This is the pain, but it's required.
I kind of wanted to know about the feelings and the way it maybe showed itself or affected your life when you were not so aware of what it was doing for you. I'll give you an example. So there's a guy called Guy Winch.
Okay.
He's a psychologist, and I have watched his video like 6 million times, and I realized that what he describes as loneliness is just something we all do all the time. So
Sure.
he is a twin brother. They move away for the first time to study psychology. He's in a completely different continent, and he's old. So at that time, you only had landlines,
Sure.
and it cost like lots of money for a couple of minutes. So
Yeah.
they would save up and they would talk to each other for 2 minutes every week.
Yeah.
It was their first birthday away from each other, so they decided they would splurge and spend and talk for 5 minutes that day. So time difference, he's waiting for him to call. He's pacing up and down his room. He doesn't call. He's like, okay, fine. Maybe he's out with friends. There's time difference, whatever. He goes to bed and he's like, this was the loneliest, worst night of my life. Because I realized that after 10 months of being away, my brother had friends and he had moved on and I didn't matter so much to him anymore. He wakes up in the morning and he looks at the phone and the receiver has been knocked off. And he goes like, oh shit. So he puts the receiver back on the phone and it rings immediately. And he picks up the phone and his brother's so pissed at him. And he's like, what is wrong with you? And he was like, I was trying to explain what happened. And then his brother's like, if I was not calling you, then why didn't you just call me?
Yeah.
And I feel like we do this all the time. We're like upset or something about somebody not reaching out and all of those things. And he says that moving away and all of those things had made him lonely. And he didn't realize that he was lonely because he was constantly surrounded by people. But when we're lonely, we're so hurt that we don't want to risk any more pain.
Yeah.
And this is sort of what chronic loneliness looks like, where it's not for a particular situation or a thing that is making you lonely, but you're sort of stuck in this feeling of, in all aspects of your life, being alone. And so I would imagine that at a certain point, you realized what loneliness did for you as an artist and the give and take that you have now decided on, figured out, enjoying with loneliness. But before that happened, do you think you can tell us a little bit about what the feelings were inside, what the thoughts were?
Yeah, I think it's a gigantic just envy of normalcy. That's how you quantify it when you're figuring it out. To be 11 or 12 and to be the lead in Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, right? But it's like 3:30 or 4:30 p.m. and all of your friends are playing. They're playing basketball or they're playing cricket or they're playing this thing. You got to go to rehearsal, So you're just with this, and theater kids are kind of like we're our own strange extraterrestrials. It's a weird breed of people, of mad people that don't quite fully fit in and misfits. But you're kind of, it's sunny outside. It's great weather. There's a field. There's kids running around. And when you come out of your rehearsal, they are observably better friends than they were before they went on the field. So you kind of feel like life is moving on without you. Or first year of college, you've gotten into college on basketball, debating, and dramatics. So basically, I fucked up my board exams, right? And my parents, throughout my 12th, they were like, you'll fuck up your board exams if you keep doing debating, dramatics, and basketball. Don't do it, you'll fuck up your board exams. Then I fucked up my board exams and I got 55%. But then I got 10% for debating, 10% for dramatics, and 10% for basketball and got into college at 85%. But then the college milks you, right? They're like, now you're going out. Now you're playing a tournament, every week and you're doing this and you're doing that. But other kids are smoking weed and getting laid. So you're like, every time I come back from some random, concert or something like that, everybody in this group seems to be closer with each other. I wish I could just smoke weed and get laid, at this age, which is possibly the most privileged thing I've ever said on a mic.
I wanted to say sorry.
To me?
Yes.
For what?
So I came to watch your show last year, and I can make an excuse about how I live under a rock.
All right.
But I don't want to, because you were talking about the backlash that had happened after the Two Indias monologue.
Yeah.
And I'm working in mental health as well, and I've been through my thing of loneliness. But when I was listening to you talk about it, I was like, damn, to feel entirely alone is a horrible, terrible feeling.
Oh, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy in the world.
Yeah. And I knew you existed as a human being. So I'm sorry I didn't, I don't know. I feel like if I had known, I would have called you, but
No, there's absolutely no apology required. It does tie up with the loneliness thing, but if you get through the darker part of that, and the darker part of that is the shorter part of that. It's just the more intense part of that. I did a whole special where the key line was, hate is yelled, but love is felt, So hate will always drown out the forces of love. But love has longevity. You can only yell for so long, before you're tired and before you lose your voice. But you can feel forever, So you learn in a situation like that the hard way that it's okay if people don't yell in your support or speak support to you. You will find out with time that they feel it, and that feeling lasts a really long time. It's not an easy tunnel to walk through, but my God, the light at the end of it is breathtaking. So I had a controversy. And by the way, in this line, we're all going to, you know what I'm saying? And the way I look at it is, there's a line, and at the front of the line is an ass whooping, right? And if you're going to have the privilege of the public eye, you're going to hit the front of the line at some point. And then you just hit the back of the line and hope to God there's enough people in front of you that you don't catch another ass whooping publicly. And then you go underground for 2-3 months. And for 2-3 months, you're very lost. You don't know what you are doing. And you don't know what's real. And then when the embers kind of settle, you announce a tour or you announce a show. And it sells out in 3 minutes. Now you're confused, right? Because you're like, is this just controversy or is this a temporary thing that is not bankable? It's like a spike in my ratings or my stock, so to speak. And then you show up and you realize the emotion with which people had come. And earlier they came to gather an emotion from you, which was laughter and enjoyment. But here they're bringing an emotion to you, which is, I'm in your corner. Like, I'm here for you, bro. Or just keep going, And then you're like, oh, this changes everything. Now this is, it's not fandom. It's an audience. And it's a conversation. And you realize that there's love there. And therefore it needs to be reciprocated. And it needs to be two ways. And so all of a sudden your art has to become more empathetic and more sensitive. And it has to make people feel far more amazing. And that becomes a responsibility that you bear, because if they were just coming in sort of like, oh, we'll see, then you get to be like, here's funny. But if they're coming in like, fucking bro, I'm here for you, then man, I got to send you home with another thing altogether. So you work harder as an artist. But it just takes a while to turn that corner.
After we've make peace, we figured it out, we find our balance with it. But when we're in it, it's horrible. And it feels like maybe there isn't, like, you don't know when it's going to turn around. And so what do you do?
I was lost in anger, to be very honest with you, because one is a sense of entitlement, which I don't have. So if you're coming at it, I would imagine from a place of extreme fame or place of extreme adulation, neither one of which are things I've experienced really. I've just experienced connection. I've not experienced adulation or fame. Then I guess in your darkest moment, you get to be like, man, why aren't people here for me? Where's my community? Where are my brethren? Where am I this thing? But for me, I wasn't really a part of the film industry. I just made movies. I got into movies that were made, but I wasn't like, in. And with comics, half the guys are just as fucked as you are. You know what I mean? So if you're silent, you're like, bro, I respect you. Like, I get it. Do what you need to do. We're a very soft target. So I expect nothing from a comedian. If a comedian gives me silence when I'm in a controversy, that's okay, man. Just take care of yourself, right? So I wasn't expecting any support. Then you just get angry, right? So then I just spent, I think, a year where no one was really working with me, but everybody respected me, which is a really weird conundrum to have, where you'd be like, oh, that guy, my God, so much respect. Cannot. You know what I mean? Like, which is this thing. And so it's like, oh, I have to turn this into art. So it was just I did 165 shows all over the world. And then I got to experience this thing with the audience. But I was just angry through it. And it became a Netflix special. And it's, in a weird way, it's like everybody was waiting for that, like the Chris Rock Oscar slap. What do you say about it? And how do you find that perfect tone? And the minute it came out, suddenly the phone started ringing. And all these people who were quiet were like, we're working together now. Now let's go. Now, and anybody who's in show business, all your agents, everybody like, let's go, man. Make hay. But when the anger vacates your body, you realize really what it's done to you. So at that moment, instead of, when the Netflix special came out and it was a massive hit, I shut down, went to therapy, got a life coach, worked out, journaled, worked on myself. Instead of kind of being like, guess who's back, or whatever the pretentious version of that is. And in a weird way, my wife says, because I was humble about it and worked on myself, I earned an Emmy from the universe, is kind of what she says. She's like, if you had just gone out and been like, it wouldn't have come. Because it came 4 months after I had done the work on myself. So, I don't know. So I'm not going to lie. It was a lot of anger. It was a lot of, I'll show you. You watch how I have a line in my new show where I talk about it a little bit, where I said, for a year, I literally said, I will take every piece of shit you fling at me and turn it into a golden joke so that even if you deny my comedy, you will not deny my alchemy, is the line. And that really personified who I was for a year, which is not a healthy way to be. I wouldn't recommend it.
I'm so glad to realize that you found this balance and
I mean,
ish.
there are days, you
I'm
know what
sure.
I'm saying? Yeah, sure.
But in for the most part, you found this balance with the loneliness that
sure.
seems to be a big part of your life. But loneliness is like a huge problem right now. So my organization had a helpline service for a few months. We tried, and every single person who came on that said, I don't have any friends. I don't have anyone to talk to. There was a study done in the US with 2,000 people in 1985, and then again in 2004. They were asked how many close friends they have, and the average went from 3 to 2. Now, I don't know everybody math skills, but for an average to drop from an entire number is a very big deal. What I've realized is if you don't address the days, it builds up. So, you found your channel of art to put this into and to push yourself in a creative manner. But even apart from that, you worked on yourself, right? You have to, because if you leave it laying around for too long, it can get...
True, but those are still passively observed big things in retrospect, right? So if I had to talk to somebody who's feeling lonely in this moment and who doesn't have the hindsight, the luxury of hindsight, I would say the following. All right, never to undermine your feelings. It is possible that the people you think don't care about you don't care about you. But no matter who you are, you have to assume as an undeniable reality that you are more loved than you think you are. You are more loved than you feel you are at this moment in time. There are people who you have not thought of. There are people who exist in your life. There are people who are part of your story who are not in your mind at this moment. But if you were to aggregate the amount of love that is felt for you in the universe at this moment in time, it is far greater than you assume it is. And just accept that as a goddamn reality because it's true. Maybe it's two people who you met in college who you haven't spoken to in this thing. Maybe it's not your mom, but your dad. Maybe it's a distant relative. You are more loved than you think you are. I have more love for me than I do hate towards me. So if 10,000 trolls think about you for that 30 seconds, I have a sister and a mother and a father who think about me 24 hours a day, and that's real love. I can work out today. I can do a push up. I can't fix the system, but yeah, I can go for a walk. I can do something. I can find new music. So that's really what I did. It's really small, like it's not large. So if I watched someone like me on a podcast when I was at my loneliest, right? And he was like, man, I turned it into art, and I'd be like, bro, fuck you, you know. Not to quote Joe Rogan, but to quote Joe Rogan, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And it feels like that, like when a kid's girlfriend leaves him at like 17, life is over, and parents are like, yeah, don't worry but
I hate it when they do that.
yeah,
I'm just like, for me, this is the worst thing that has
this is the
happened.
worst thing that has ever happened to me, right? So life is over right now. And so at that moment, somebody going like, you'll come around in the universe, fuck you, bro. But in that moment, somebody being like, yeah, she dumped you, but like, this hot dog is amazing, this is real, and it's right in front of you, that's far more valuable. So like, if I get to put things out in this podcast, then gratitude number one, you are far more loved. It is undeniable. Don't even argue with the universe. You are far more loved if you start to count the number of people and how much they possibly love you. There is many steps to your outcome, but there is one step that is directly in front of you. And the movie does not end here for anyone. Those four things.
If you can think of any small things that you do to stay feeling connected from time to time. All the examples you've given have so far revolved around kind of connecting with yourself and being okay with your loneliness in yourself. Not so much about reaching out.
Yeah, it's not something I'm very comfortable with, and have severe aspirations to be better at it, and sometimes envy of people who are great at it. My wife, my God, she's the life of the party. Like, me and Shivani walk into a room together, looking at me, and everybody's like, Shivani's here. Something amazing is about to happen. And I don't know what magical chemical runs through her body that just radiates, this light that people turn into moths all around it and come to her. But I couldn't do it. I would not be able to do that. So I don't know how to reach out to people casually. And I've seldom reached out to people in my lowest moments. I've just kind of sat with it a little bit.
Because everything you've said and every instance you've talked about it, it seems very much that you process your loneliness or your feelings, all of them, sort of with yourself or with
Which is
your
not a
work.
healthy way to do it, by the way. I wouldn't recommend it. It's better to process it with other people, I would imagine.
I would say it's easier only
To process with other people?
to have one more way of processing it.
Yeah.
It's great to be able to do it with yourself. You need to also learn that. I've just realized that sometimes we limit ourselves to either this or that.
Yeah.
And I find that it's easier to have more ways in which you could possibly deal with this feeling or
Or to see what you're not seeing.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you're the asshole. Like, we should all
It's an
account for the
option.
fact that maybe you're the asshole.
It's a possibility.
Right?
Yeah. I try to do this thing where I ask the guest if they're willing to make a pledge. And when I say pledge, I mean like the smallest, tiniest thing.
Okay.
So if we're talking about loneliness,
Like allegiance to the cult of...
yes, join my cult. We are going to save the world.
All right.
So anything, might I suggest that you learn to reach out to people and practice that as your pledge?
I would pledge to take the people in my life and interact with them in a direct, simple, appreciative, open way enough, and make them feel special and focused on, and like I'm present with them enough, so that were they ever in a tough spot or feeling lonely, they would have absolutely no hesitation in reaching out to me, irrespective of what I was going through. I feel like sometimes the assumption around me is Veer does 45 different things and I shouldn't bother him with this. I would pledge to put out that I'm the kind of person that you should bother with this because I bother with you. I think that's the pledge.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. This was fun.
Hello, this is Ira Khan, and that was Call Me Hopeful with The Swaddle. To listen to more such episodes, subscribe to The Swaddle on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts from.